Chechen fighters who fought in Syria are now on the ground over in Ukraine. They are helping the Ukrainian side battle Russian forces in the east. For more on this story, we can bring in France 24's Wasim Nasser. Wasim, great to see you. Abdülhakim al-Surechi, who exactly is he?
Actually, he's a veteran of the fight in Syria and even of the fight in Chechnya. He was one of the commanders in the last Grozny battle against Russian forces, and him and others along him fought in Syria along jihadi factions, and notably during the fight to take over Idlib. So he was there in Syria and the Latakia region, we can see it here on the map, and implicated in many fights against the Syrian army. To be more accurate, he didn't belong neither to Al-Qaeda nor the Islamic State. He has an independent faction, Ajnad al-Kafkas, which doesn't belong to either sides, who stayed out of internal jihadi fights in Idlib, but fought one more time the Syrian government and local militias on behalf or next to the rebels in the Idlib area. Here we see a footage where he arrived to the town of Krivoy, and he was seen with an official Chechen opposition delegation. And here, which is interesting, is during the fighting of Bakhmut, and we see him firing this rocket, and then we'll see him here in the street-to-street fight. We'll see him just now going underground with other fighters. So this is the first footage we have of him actually fighting in Ukraine, in Bakhmut, to be more specific.
And how did he get from Syria to Ukraine?
We don't know how did he get. We know that a few months back, before October, because he arrived in Ukraine in October, he was arrested in Turkey. He was accused of extortion. Then the Turks said that he was innocent, and he was released. Here we see him next to the prime minister or the head of the Chechen government in exile when he arrived in Ukraine back in October on this footage. And here also images in the town of Krivoy a few days back in January. Here too, we see him armed. We see him set to go fight in Bakhmut, as we saw in the footage. We don't know how he got to Ukraine. We know that he has family in Poland. We know that he was arrested in Turkey, then accused of extortion, then released. We can suspect that someone facilitated his arrival to Ukraine to be in the ranks of the Ukrainian opposition, fighting next to the Chechen opposition, fighting next to the Ukrainian government since back in 2014.
And very briefly, what are the implications of his arrival in Ukraine?
Well, actually, he was pushed to leave Syria. We should know this because HTS, the dominant faction in Idlib, is pushing foreign fighters to leave the area towards Turkey unless they are imprisoned. And we can imagine that he will be monitored very closely in Ukraine. We know that Ukraine, prior to February of last year, was very active in fighting Islamic State cells that even caused some threat to Russia. But we don't know today how things will go on, but I guess that he will be monitored very closely. Other Chechens were kicked out of Ukraine back in 2014, 2015, but in the ongoing war, we don't know how things are going to evolve, but we can suspect that the Ukrainians will monitor his presence very closely.
Thank you very much for that, Wasim Nasser.
Thank you.